Hey folks, Tom Rayner here. I am so incredibly enthused that Belay is the founding sponsor of the Church Answers podcast. We've always had a great relationship with Belay, and now we have the opportunity to work with them even more closely in this brand new Church Answers podcast. Now, I'm going to say a few things about Belay, but I want you to hear this personally from me, from Tom Rayner. I have used Belay for many, many years. In fact, I even used them before they were called Belay. I'm not going to give you the other name of their company before then. And what I mean is we have found these type of workers to be incredibly effective, incredibly relational, and Belay takes care of everything. You need an executive assistant, and they'll provide it for you. You need a bookkeeper, they'll provide it. They become a member of your team in many ways, but Belay is doing all of the heavy lifting. You know, many of you leaders, there's a moment in your personal and professional life where you realize that you may be in your own way. You know, you need help. Let Belay come in. Delegating it to them, it may seem intimidating, especially if you don't know how they can do so. You don't have to worry about reading every email, scheduling every call, responding to every request. You have more time, more energy to work on the things that move the business forward, and you can achieve your big goals both personally and professionally. So I want to just say with a loud acclamation, welcome, Belay. And let me just encourage you. You've got to get this resource. You've got to get this resource. It's free. And it's called Delegate to Elevate. You pastors and leaders and business leaders, incredible resource to talk about how to do delegation. Here's how you get it. It's in the show notes, but belaysolutions.com/Tom Rayner, THOMRAINER. So start trusting your team more. Stop diluting your efforts. Empower yourself to courageously focus on your strengths and delegate your weaknesses. In no time, you'll do what you're supposed to do. Lead your church effectively, or if you're in a business, growing your business. Once again, we welcome Belay as the founding sponsor. And once again, get that downloadable at belaysolutions.com/Tom Rayner. We are already in week 3 of the Church Answers podcast. And because we release 3 every week, that means we've got 9 fresh podcasts for you. If you haven't listened to the other 6, I encourage you to go back and look at some of the topics. If they appeal to you, they're short, they're to the point, a nugget or two, maybe a humorous story at times, but 10 minutes tops for you to listen or watch these podcasts. We release 3 a week, so you can decide if you want to watch or see 1 or 2 or 3 of them. I hope you'll do all of them, and I hope you'll tell others about them, as well as giving us a rating and review, or even subscribing at YouTube. Also, remember this, and I've mentioned it in a previous podcast, go be a part of Church Answers. Go be a part of that community Church Answers member. If you want to be able to ask a question at any time and get an answer promptly from both the community and from us, the subject matter experts, go to Church Answers membership. We have the link there, so you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to share with you about someone most of you probably have not heard of. His name is Donald McGavran. Now, you may not have heard of him, but you have heard of his influence. Unfortunately, his influence is perceived negatively in some circles. The reason his influence is perceived negatively in some circles is because he is accredited things that were not a part of what he advocated. Now, that may all sound confusing, and I may have lost you already, but I think you really need to know the name Donald McGavran. Okay, I'm going to give you his title as he is known in popular biographies. He's deceased now. His title is the Father of the Church Growth Movement. Your first reaction, if you're like many leaders, would be, oh, church growth. That's that place that only cares about numbers and shallow discipleship, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, that's what many people think of when they think of church growth or the church growth movement. And to be certain, there have been continuations since McGavran that have taken it in unfortunate directions. But for the most part, not McGavran. When you start talking about the father of the church growth movement, I hope before you are too critical or too quick to judge, you have an idea who he is. Okay, who is Donald McGavran? I've already said he's the father of the church growth movement. I'm not going to give his full biography here, but I just want you to know a little bit about him. He really began to do the types of things that would become a part of the church growth movement while he was a missionary to India. And while he was a missionary to India, he would look at the churches that had been started, and he would notice that it did not take too long before those churches stopped reaching people with the gospel. They just started getting busy and started doing church life as usual. Sound familiar? That's what happens to almost any church if it's not intentional about evangelism. And so what Donald McGavran did was he tried to find what tools God was using to get these churches to turn to be more evangelistic on the mission field in India. Because there was a lot of fruit and many people began to be reached for Christ, it was suggested to McGavran that he come back to the United States and become the founder of the Church Growth Institute and the School of Church Growth and World Missions at Fuller Seminary. And so he did. And so he founded that, and his entire purpose was to move churches, to remove all the blockages, to remove everything so that people could hear the gospel and churches could reach people for Christ. As a matter of fact, in his later years, he published a book that very few people have read. He was sometimes a difficult read, just simply with his writing style. That contributed to the fact that many people don't know who he is or what he's doing. But his first book was called Bridges of God. If you were to read the original editions today, let me correct myself. That is the book that became the founding book of the church growth movement. I don't know for sure. That book published in 1955. He may have had one before that, so I don't want to say anything incorrectly. But Bridges of God, published in 1955, became the beginning point of the church growth movement. And the book was just what it said. What are the bridges that we Christians and churches can use to reach people who are not believers in Christ? And let's get everything out of the way that is interfering with that. Let's focus on it. He had almost a simple church mentality, if you would. So McGavran was all about the gospel. McGavran was all about reaching people. And even though Bridges of God probably is a little bit heavy in sociology instead of theology, and instead of practically applying it to the church, the essence of it was, what can we do to reach people with the gospel? So he came to McGavran came to Fuller, and McGavran began to start this school at Fuller Seminary, and he began to influence a lot of people. I could give you some names out there. I've decided not to give the names of people who were directly influenced by him for fear that we may get into a discussion we don't need to be, but a lot of people were influenced by McGavran, most of them positively. And they became leaders in churches. They became leaders in institutions. And what was the common tie between most of these people who became followers of McGavran? Followers in the sense, not in a Christ-like following type of way, but followers in the sense that they read him, looked up to him, and used some of the approaches that he said. Well, these churches became more evangelistic. And the reason the church growth movement became known for numbers is because McGavran said you need to be accountable for your evangelistic efforts. And about the only way most churches can be accountable is through some type of numerical count. But he wasn't all about numbers. In his later life, he wrote a book called Effective Evangelistic Churches. And again, in typical McGavran writing style, again, not widely read, but it was basically why training institutions, particular seminaries, need to be training students more in evangelism, because we have pastors who are not making evangelism a priority. So this man had a profound influence upon global Christianity and American Christianity as well. I only had the opportunity to have one conversation with him. It was by phone. It was not that long, so I cannot say I was a personal connection. Some have said that I was somewhat the third generation of church growth. I'm careful to say that today because church growth connotation has a lot of negative connotations today. But in terms of the emphasis on evangelism, I am very, very honored to wear that moniker of a third generation church growth person. So we could talk about some of the second generation who've been influenced, but I said I've decided not to go down that path to distract from the primary purpose. What is the primary purpose of this? To let you know that Donald McGavran is a man that needs to be studied a little bit more closely in history, that needs to be given his proper place in history, and needs to be remembered as a man who was passionate about getting the gospel to people outside the church. If you ever want to study about him, do so. Donald McGavran. There's a lot been written about him, and you can just begin to find out some good things about this man. Continue to listen to us, to watch us at the Church Answers podcast. Once again, we're providing 3 a week, and we have 3 new ones for you this week. We're all the way up to episode 9 by the time we finish all 3 of these. Thank you again. We'll see you or hear you in the next podcast of the Church Answers podcast. Tom Rayner back with you. Before we leave this podcast, to just thank again Belay for being the founding sponsor of the Church Answers podcast. Hear me very well. I said it at the beginning. I'm going to say it at the end. We have used Belay at Church Answers for several years. We've had incredible workers that they have sent us, and Belay takes care of everything. They take care of paying them. They take care of all of the what would be paperwork now, e-work. They take care of it all, and you are free to do the things that you need to be doing as a pastor, as a business leader. So go to Belay. Go to belaysolutions.com and do this. Go to belaysolutions.com/Tom Rayner. That's THOMRAINER. When you go to Tom Rayner, don't forget the H in Tom, and get this download. It is incredible. Delegate to elevate. I can just promise you with this download, you'll get new insights of how to free yourself to do the things you love to do the most. Thank you, Belay. Thank you for being who you are. Go to that download, belaysolutions.com/Tom Rayner, THOMRAINER.